Hey, fellow Geonteers, those of us like our spirituality with a twist, we are back. I am reunited with Daniel, and it feels so good. Reunited with everybody that we get to talk. I've been out of the loop for a little bit. Traveled in Morocco. Daniel and I were talking about that a little bit off mic, before the episode started, and highly recommended. Apparently, Daniel has family even in Marrakesh, so we can all be a little bit jealous because he gets to go to Marrakesh whenever he wants. And
but you can go whenever you, Eric. You can go.
I can go whenever I want too.
Right.
Can I go and stay with your family?
Yes, for sure.
Our friendship pays off again.
That's right. Yeah, yet again.
The friendship that just keeps giving.
That's right.
I thought it was like a total Daniel thing too, because there's just tons of like drum circles like in the old city at night, and I thought, oh, Daniel should be here. Just
I should be there. I definitely should.
So great, all the music going on, just exactly the vibe. So anyway, so that was my kind of New Year's experience, and then I was one of those people who got stranded with the air travel, so I got an extra week in Montreal, just stuck in Montreal.
Oh,
I couldn't get back in the country, and then then COVID. That's been the start of the year. All of the things. I rode the emotional wave from high to low. But anyway, so I'm glad to be back, like to be doing this again. And even though Daniel had done one previous, I just had the thought of doing kind of like what would be maybe our New Year's resolution episode, but maybe it's even a little bit bigger picture than that. We're going to talk about a lot of things just beyond the resolution thing.
Yeah.
My idea for the episode was kind of sparked by my conversation with my daughter. I got my 20-year-old, and she kind of asked me what my New Year's resolution was, and I gave her an answer, and she really hated it.
That means you're
mocked.
That means you're doing good, Eric. If that's the case,
she rolled her eyes and mocked me. It was like, what the fuck? So I will save my resolution thing for later. Foreshadowing, as they say. Her resolutions were really cute though, because they involve different things, some of which involve better skincare. Which is a good resolution. Why not?
Self-care is the best resolution, man.
Self-care. So I guess what we'll go through, we got a number of different things maybe to talk about around this. As far as the New Year's resolution thing overall, do you have any specific ideas about that as a concept? I know you talked about in the other episode. Anything you want to throw back to about that?
No, I think, what we talked about, and maybe a place where we can kind of talk about it now, is that like culturally, this is a time in which there is open space for dialogue around change. And that like that is looked at positively, and it's encouraged and even supported. I was reading the kind of New York Times little free reader they send out in the morning, and this morning they had like some exercise thing in there that I've never seen in there before. Now, regardless of what you think about the New York Times, doesn't matter. They had a little exercise thing in there. Like
I had noticed that. I'm sorry, I had noticed that too. I put it in the notes for myself on this, that they started doing that. I'd never seen it before. But they have their own little New Year's resolution bit that they're dropping in occasionally.
Yeah,
right?
So I think it just like it's an interesting time, and like you have written down here, like this idea of like special windows in time.
Yeah.
And I think
I would. Yeah, go ahead.
That's probably one of the things that we can look at on a larger scale, not just simply like New Year's resolution, but that's a microcosm for this idea of like opportunities, like large scale collective opportunities, whether that's astrological or cultural or whatever, probably astrological,
Yeah. That's gonna be interesting. So we'll kick that all around. I think I know people who really believe in the New Year's resolution thing. I have one friend who used to like, okay, what are you doing New Year's Eve? Make sure you're doing something good that will set the tone for the new year. And I do think about that. Normally I'm on retreat. And,
yes, as am I. I'm coming out of retreat.
Yeah. And then, so I always feel that sets a good vibe for a year, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And actually, it was like with our beloved spiritual friend and mentor, Lama Glenn Mullen. I actually got an empowerment with him on New Year's, so that was kind of fun. And a pretty good one. I felt pretty good afterwards. So my year started off with a good bang. The NYT thing, the New York Times thing, has been kind of funny because I've watched a little bit of it. And they had one interesting one, which was the idea of like talking to a stranger. That was one of the ones they listed for the week. And I thought, well, that's an interesting one. Just go and have a nice conversation with a stranger. And I thought, okay, I don't know, whatever you think of the New York Times, but I thought, okay, that's cool that they're doing that at least,
Yeah.
And I thought about that whole thing of people feeling so lonely now. There's been these like terrible studies of like people really being like lonely. And we're going to do some episodes in the upcoming year. We're going to talk about what our goals for the year are a little bit, but we want to talk about kind of like, what would you call it? Like men's mental health and men's health and awareness and spiritual development or something.
Yeah. And it's like we talked about earlier. And once I have this up and running, or I have all the pieces hammered out, like, so I'm going to lead a men's, or myself and a classmate of mine, we're going to lead a men's retreat in March, and we only have room for about a half a dozen people, men, to come. But it's something that, like, it's similar to like a women's group or whatever's group. It provides an opportunity for, like-minded or like-bodied people to be able to express in a space that has resonance. Not that other people can't have resonance, but there's something that's inherent to being whoever you are. And if you're around other people of the same kind of identity, I guess we can call it, then, you might feel a little bit more apt to open up a little bit more deeply, a little bit more authentically, because you're not worried about, some of the things are intrinsic to our human kind of cultural experience or human tribal experience. If a man was to show emotion in society, that would most often be viewed as a weakness.
Yeah, you were talking about in some of your cacao ceremonies now, a lot of men will get very emotional.
Very emotional. And it's
not feeling safe to be in that space. So that's not just a men's thing. That's
no, it's everybody can do that. But it's nice to be able to
spaces.
Yeah, and it's just nice to be able to be in these kind of spaces and not feel like, and feel like it's okay. If you want to open up about something, that it's not okay, it's encouraged. Other people are probably, I find that when people open up in a group space, they do it for themselves, but other people feel the release also.
Oh yeah,
because they see it and they're like, oh, I want to be able to do that one day. I want to be so bold to be able to express myself, So like taking that, like we're talking about windows of opportunity, take that window of opportunity, and if not personal expression, then feel the resonance of the other person expressing. It happens all the time.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the idea of like sometimes we'll do the windows of time, but sometimes it's like since everybody's being minded that way, it just creates maybe that little bit of energetic vibe, right?
Yeah.
If a bunch of people are thinking about this, it almost has a resonance, like kind of like our Dean Radin episodes, you know what I mean? Where like people's minds affect one another, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of people starts thinking the same shit, like, oh no, Trump's going to win this election. That was one of his examples in that episode, right? Then all the random number generators in the world start freaking out.
Yeah.
Because the minds are making the random number generators go wonky.
Yeah. And for people who haven't checked those, if we have newer listeners, which we do, which, thank you for tuning in, by the way, new listeners, old listeners, not say old, we'll say classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the episodes with Dean Radin, and his name will be a reference in the title, are really, really cool from a psycho-spiritual scientific aspect. He's the author of a number of books, and we were happy to have him on. He's a funny guy. I like him.
Told his life background story too, which we always try to do with people. So I think it was on that, like on the men's thing, and then we'll do our windows of time. But it was just, you were talking about in some of these things, men feel free to dance in a way that's very free, right?
Yeah.
Be able to express themselves. And I think it's like we want to do this, is I guess foreshadowing over foreshadowing, because we're going to want to do some episodes around this over the course of the year. At the end of this episode, we'll talk about some of our goals for the upcoming year, even in the show. But like we'll do episodes around that. And the study that I'd seen, Daniel, was just how lonely a lot of men are. There's this crazy statistic, and I don't want to try to quote the number, but it's shockingly high, of men who feel like they don't have a single friend, like not one. And it was like 38% or something like ridiculously high. People feel like they have no friends, no social contacts whatsoever. So anyways,
it's harder to make friends as an adult, number one. It just is. But this goes to this idea of community, the larger idea of being connected. And we talk about this. I talked about this in the episode with Priscilla that I just did. And we started out the conversation with the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, right? The awakened nature within you, the teachings that help you to get to that awakened nature, or awaken that sleeping nature, if you want to call it that. But then the spiritual community, both the tight-knit one, the people that are meditating with you, working with you, but then also the community at large. And I think having a balance in all of these three things is really important. And from a Chinese medical perspective, it is extremely important. The kind of sharing of the heart fire has to happen through the reflection of that through other people.
Passing the torch of the heart fire.
Yeah, it's just so important. So if you feel that, if you don't have that, even on a small scale, the sense of isolation is overbearing, and it's I don't know that you could overcome it, actually, because even in a monk in a monastery, they take their time away, but then they come back to the monastery and they talk with their people about it, and they're not just like away 100% of the time living.
I mean, when you go to a retreat, it's actually a lot of people are in your face like all the time.
Right.
It's like, it's really an exercise of learning how to deal with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, if we look at long-term goals, 2023 and beyond, I mean, I think we both like to see this podcast to be a chance for people to build community too.
Yeah.
So we keep chipping away at that project as we go.
Yeah.
All right. So special windows in time. We'll talk about what we think about New Year's time as being a special window in time. What you would say spiritually, astrologically, and so forth.
Yeah, who knows what makes the window in time special, I tend to think it's probably astrological, past forward,
So we'll give some examples, right? So actually it's funny because we're going into one of the special Buddhist tantric windows here, right? Especially for people who have certain kinds of Buddhist teachings, Buddhist tantric teachings and empowerments and all that, in what they call the mother tantras, which is the class of the tantras that have to do with feminine energy, which in Buddhist tantra gets tied into the experience of wisdom. Masculine gets tied to the idea of bliss. So it's kind of interesting. Of course, there's bliss and wisdom on both sides, but the wisdom energy time is coming upon us, right? And the feminine energies are also probably associated with this idea of the Buddha nature or the clear light mind. So we're heading into that window. So like I was just thinking about it as we were prepping this episode, these times of the year that are kind of special. At the end of the year in the lunar calendar, in tantric Buddhist culture, you do, especially if you have this, you do one special ritual at the end of the year, and then you do kind of another one going in, and we're approaching that time. So I was thinking, okay, yeah. So I guess the idea is that there's like times when the energy gets kind of special, astrologically, and just in the general vibes of what's going on. So we're going into that one, which I think I will definitely be practicing
on the 17th, right?
I have it set in my calendar.
Okay.
It's usually in like the 24th day of the lunar month, and then in the 10th.
Okay.
Which is kind of a funny one. I've talked with Lama Glenn a little bit about it, and I don't know if he said anything that particularly striking about it, but it's kind of like 4 days before the full moon and 4 days before the new moon. You do this. So it's this little window here. But so there's a monthly one, and we'll talk about different windows, weekly and monthly and all that. But this one's special because it's like kind of the end of the year. So as the year flips, the end of the lunar year, and then the start of the next one. You can count time by the sun, or you can count time by like kind of like the cycles of the moon. And like Buddhist culture, they a lot of times do like cycles of the moon.
Right.
So it's slightly different calendar setup, like on the Chinese calendar.
Right. We have, that's one thing we have oddly neglected is astrology.
I know.
I mean, like oddly neglected, and we have.
But there are many things we've oddly neglected.
Nah, but that one, but we talk about that. You know what I'm saying? Like we it comes up.
Well, okay. One of the promises is that we're going to talk more about sex in 2023.
Okay.
We've oddly neglected that too.
Oh yeah, true.
Frustrating. It's been a slow burn. It's been a long courtship.
Slow burn. We're still in the texting phase, like.
We had reasons in the beginning for some of these things. Like we really made the call, like, okay, we didn't want to come up with this name and then just start talking about sexual positions immediately, because it would seem kind of cheesy. And then there was also a question, like you brought up in the beginning, of like audience trust, like not just to start talking a bunch of stuff that was super intimate in the beginning. It's but anyway, so I was just bringing it up because it's one of our slow burn conversations. But the astrological thing too, and you and I got interest in that, and we know people who have deep interest in it.
Yeah.
I used to do it kind of like semi-professional, so I'm definitely interested. So a lot of this is astrological. I mean, even with this, Tibetan thing, you're really looking at the moon and what's happening with the moon, and you're kind of hooking up your meditation around the moon.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The other one that came to mind to me, because I do kind of keep it, funnily enough, even though, well, it's interesting for me. So the Yom Kippur one's another good example of this.
Okay.
Right. And because of my interest in the Kabbalah, I tend to do something a little special on that day, but it's considered to be a special energetic window, and it's astrological too,
Right.
right? And it's based around the moon, right? And especially, this idea that you're in the fall and you're dealing with this certain little energetic window where there's probably with the fall, there's the idea of like probably like the change of the season and like death, to be honest, right? Just that transition from fall into winter has that feeling, but it's also like this time of purification, right?
Right.
During that little window of time. I always think about it has to do with like the Chinese medical metal phase. If we kind of like do a little bit of a cross-cultural link up here, and like that's kind of a time of purification, right? Probably the metal phase has something to do with purifying,
The
right? Associated with the lungs and the large intestine, so you shit and purify, and you breathe and purify.
Right.
Yeah.
The what's his name? I what do you want to call him? Like psychedelic philosopher extraordinaire, Terence McKenna.
Oh yeah.
He always talks about how like if you have a psychedelic experience that is just very, very difficult, like very, it's more, I guess we'll say, more strife than not.
You've had those experiences, right? And I mean,
Oh, definitely.
That's stuff that we would,
yeah.
All these episodes, like we have years of material.
Well, literally.
Yeah.
But he said that like if you are unable to isolate, some mitigating circumstances as to why that might be the case, right? Assuming you have the right setting, your intention is clear, like you've been preparing yourself for this kind of a thing, nothing crazy happens, during, but it's just difficult on an astronomical level. He says, he goes, it's very likely astrological. Like there's
yeah.
There is something that is in the cards for you at this time that is going to make this harder than it would normally otherwise be. And maybe that's karmic that it happens that way, but that it's there. And it brings, I think my point is that like there's probably powerful astrological times throughout the year in various cultures, depending on what they look at, So it's, I think seemingly appropriate to acknowledge the strength of the astrological influences on us, whether we want to acknowledge them or not.
I think when I really got interested in this was partially back in grad school. I had a friend who was really interested in the astrological sides of things, and probably like a lot of people, I was like, well, that's just a bunch of hokey bullshit.
Yeah.
But when we do our deep dive, we'll do it, and I'll kind of tell people, maybe foreshadowing, how I got like convinced of this, because I did get pretty convinced, like, oh no, there's something to this for sure,
Yeah.
But then, once I got interested in it, it was also like traditions where you pay attention to this, like in tantric Buddhism or in the Kabbalah or something. There is this thing that like you can start to see the connection between the rhythms and the macrocosm and then the rhythms in your own micro life, right?
Yeah.
And you could kind of use that. So I try to take it. This is, I think, what was one of the interesting things we want to do with this episode is, I know for me, I try to, I guess the phrase would be, take advantage of these. I don't know if that's always the right phrase, because that always sounds weird in English, but no one's getting taken advantage of. But I try to use those opportunities.
Yeah.
So I'll do, because I do love the Kabbalah, and it's just part of my history as a person to have this fascination. We haven't done our deep dive there yet either, but we will. But I got interested, and so I keep that day. I keep Yom Kippur, and I do the food and water fast, and I kind of do the meditations that seem right for the day, as far as appropriate. And so I keep that one, because it's one of those times of year that it feels special. It does, right? It seems to have a special vibe to it. I wanted to say something a little bit funny about it. This is like maybe a preview of our Kabbalah episodes, but there is something really fascinating, like about how like old cultures think about these things, because it's associated with the time of Libra, that astrological sign, right? And then in the Hebrew alphabet, there's this whole thing where there's a tradition of associating the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet with the planets that were visible in the solar system. So there's like a letter that corresponds to Venus, and there's a letter that corresponds to Mars, and there's a letter that corresponds to Jupiter, and so on. And they also have letters that correspond to each of the astrological signs, which is very cool. And we'll probably have to do something about that as we preview our 2023. I'm like looking forward at some point to talking about that.
Yeah.
It's super interesting. But the letter that corresponds to Libra is very interesting in that it like kind of is a special letter, that it reaches above the line. So, where you write in the line when you're a kid, and this is a letter that like reaches above the line. It's the only one that really does it. It like stretches above. All the letters are a certain height, and this one has this upper extension, kind of like reaching up, you know? And that's the whole idea, that letter captures the idea that, of like reaching up to higher energies, reaching up to the divine, reaching up to Adonai or something, right? You're reaching up, right? And that will draw a response to like reach back down to you, right? And you were talking about that pre-show, that reaching out, and then the energy comes in, right? Yeah. So it has that quality to it, that reaching up, which is kind of like the vibe of that time. And so, it's associated with Libra, right? And it's associated with that energy of the year, and it's a time when you can reach up, So Yom Kippur, in a way, is kind of like symbolized by that letter, maybe you could say, or that process and part of like reach. There's more to it than that, obviously, but reaching up, is the energy of that time. So it's a special time to lift up your heart or something like that, right? And even like sidebar thing, but I wanted to do it because it's so interesting, because it's how cultures think about these windows of time, So, that letter, that reaches up is also the letter that starts the word for the heart, right? And so it's the time when you can kind of reach up from your heart, right? It's cool. Yeah. So we'll try to do more about like this Kabbalistic thing going forward, but I just wanted to do that little side thing, because it kind of like, I know, it captures a feeling of like how people think about this, how people think about these special windows. They have these symbols around them and these meanings, and then if you can get into it, you can kind of sort of even start to feel it. You know what I mean? I know. What do you think? Before you go on, Daniel, did you want to talk about any shamanic ones that you think are really important, or how do you feel about that? I don't know as much about shamanic thought around that.
I mean, certain people are going to be, more drawn towards the lunar calendar for sure. I mean, it depends on what you talk about, like shamanic, because the shamanic practice is a practice. It's not an ism, like a series of codified sort of things.
You and Mary Kay like make that point a lot.
Yeah. And so, but like if you look at like some of the more pagan holidays, which are shamanically based, those are all astrologically based, as are all the other, kind of Christian holidays. We did an episode with Mary Kay on Yule, right? And that's obviously referencing, not just, Jesus's supposed or his, I guess you could say,
potential time of birth.
Yeah.
Potential
but
birthday
also,
party. Gotcha. Okay.
But also like the kind of like winter solstice, and Easter is the spring equinox, and you know what I'm saying? So all these various points throughout the year that are observed in the pagan tradition, or in what we view now as a pagan tradition. Of course, there was varied place by place, are all shamanically based. So I think those two things probably are closer related. Like, it's not shamanism on one side, paganism on the other side, something else over here. They're completely intermingled. It's like calling prayer. Prayer is ubiquitous throughout Tibetan Buddhism and Islam and Judaism and Christianity. It just depends on like what specific style or language or whatever they're saying,
Yeah, it's like kind of like, okay, so we were talking kind of about there, and I knew a lot of people who were kind of Wiccan.
Yeah.
Right. So you can go through the Sabbaths of the year, right? And they all have like, they're all astrologically tied in, in different ways, right? And they're these little special units of energy. And it's cool because you can see like in myself, but also even in others. Like I watching the experience of someone else go through these things. I had a really interesting one where someone I knew went to like the Yom Kippur one, Kabbalah wise. So they had kind of a special Kabbalah Yom Kippur thing.
Sure.
And she went to it, and she came back, and it was amazing, like how much like just healing vibe she had. It was incredible. I was like, when I saw her, I wasn't feeling good or something. I think I was like physically sick. I had a headache, or like maybe I was even had a cold or something. And it was just like gone immediately, just being around the person, because she had carried out so much of that vibe of that window of time and that practice, right? Those rituals within that window,
Yeah.
So, that's cool. You can see how it affects people. But my travels in Morocco, I had that thing where I saw the mosque in Casablanca, which is one of the, I don't know, I think maybe it's the third biggest mosque in the world or something like that. Definitely worthwhile going to go see. And the way the timing worked out, I was there on a Friday for the call to prayer. you know?
Oh yeah.
So the call to prayer was coming out, and people are starting to find their way in the mosques. And there's like a huge courtyard around this mosque. It's really beautiful. And I was like, oh, this feels so fantastic, just to be around this, all of that human intention in that little window of time flooding into that area. It's just like that special feeling that can happen from these things. And I don't know if we really like have these things in our culture. For a lot of people, you don't get to do that thing where you say, okay, this is a special time. Whether that's like the astrological part of it, where you get to connect to the macrocosm part of that feeling, or whether it's just even like getting the whole community of people all going in to do that thing at one time. I mean, you're doing that because you're running cacao ceremonies and other things, but like it is something that isn't like kind of there in the culture. I
No,
mentioned that's something that you really think about a lot, because that's kind of
it's
like your
not. No.
community feeling, right?
And what you're talking about, even on a larger scale, is a ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And ceremony does not exist in this westernized culture. You might have, for people who have experienced ceremony before, when I say the word, it's understood instant. Okay, got it, ceremony. But if you've never experienced a ceremony before, then you might be thinking of like a wedding ceremony. Like it has to be associated with a thing. Baptism or a bar mitzvah, or some kind of ceremonial thing, as opposed to just a healing ceremony or a prayer ceremony or some ritualistic kind of a thing that people, to your point, have a similar kind of intention, maybe different person to person, but the desire to be there to experience, all at the same time on a larger scale doesn't really occur. When you were talking about it, I was trying to think, okay, is there a ritual or a thing that we do as a culture that like we're all around the same place doing the same thing, thinking similar things? The only time I could think of that has a time associated with it is July 4th.
Watching the Super Bowl?
Watching the Super Bowl, yeah, but like, man, even more. July 4th is more.
Yeah.
Because it's nighttime and everyone, you're not going to do fireworks during the day. You're going to do them at night, and you're supposed to think about the awe of fireworks and, the people who gave life and limb and, for our liberties or whatever the case, whatever the story is,
Yeah.
Because Christmas Eve is different times for different people and different multiple families, and Hanukkah, I don't know, maybe Sabbath, but that's only really for,
sub communities of people,
for
right?
yeah. So this is like kind of like American,
the American
lexicon
ritual.
of experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like we have our Catholic roots, you and I talk about occasionally, and
Sure.
like, there was a thing of going to like a Sunday mass. I think having those experiences made me a little bit more set up to appreciate these kinds of ritual things when they came up in new settings. We talked about that off and on sometimes in the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. This part of the episode was just sort of like, yeah, maybe you get to think in your own life about like cycles of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when there might be these like special windows that you can kind of maybe set something apart. You can hook that up with some of the examples. We'll go through the rest of them for the month and the week and all that. And we could maybe talk a little bit about how we've done it with our own lives, right? But there is something maybe about thinking, if you're listening to this, about what it would be like to just maybe start to build some of that into your life, right? Yeah. And whether you do that around these specific ideas that might be more astrological, astronomical, like you were talking about, Daniel, or whether it's just something that you do from your own point of intention, that's good too, right? So, okay, so I know for me, I've tended to do it kind of like this. I'll do, and it's again because I've been involved in these things like Kabbalah and Tantric Buddhism in my life, that, I'm used to kind of working within these cycles. So now at this point in my life, there's kind of like the 10th and the 14th of the month in Buddhist Tantra where I do something a little special, right? I have like 2 kind of like tantric practices that are kind of like special for me on those 2 days. Everyone in that tradition will do this thing. Maybe you could do little variations as your own personal thing. So I got what I like to do on those days. I kind of like, I do what they call like self-empowerments. So I kind of hook myself up to the tantric practices that I do. But in the Kabbalah, they have things like the new moon could be a special time, right? Where you're tapping into the energy when the moon comes up again. That's a special vibe, right? I have kind of a soft spot for the new moon because my daughter was born on the new moon.
I was born on a new moon.
Oh, look at you special ones.
What do
So
they
it's a
say?
good
What do they
vibe.
say about that, Eric? Or what is the
It's what would they say? It's fortuitous, it's auspicious, you know. You're tapping into the energy of of that thing in a kind of a very intense way. Like my daughter was born on the new moon of like Sagittarius, right? And she's like a little Sag creature running around with sort of a very sort of pure embodiment, probably of that quality or something. I think that would be the idea. What's yours? The new moon in Capricorn?
Capricorn? Yeah.
Oh, so you're so Capricorn-y. Yeah. Well, you reference it more than I do. You'll in these episodes go, well, you know, I'm a Capricorn, so I want to see society improve. I want to build something. I want to see things go forward, right?
You got to own it, man.
Quality.
You just got to, at some point, you got to just accept that's who you are, you know?
I'll have to double check it. I might be born in the new moon going into Cancer. I'll have to see, but probably not. I think I missed it.
No one's perfect, Eric, you know?
Well, what can you do, right? We all got our crosses to bear. We all have our chains wrapped around our ankles. Not like you all.
No, we're free.
People born in the moon, just I'm Capricorn.
We're born free. We're freedom children.
So you can do new moon rituals. I know one Buddhist teacher, interesting guy. He was, you know, Japanese. He was a dentist.
Oh, Japanese dentist.
And he got this special kind of calling to go to, what are they? Is it Myanmar now? Is that what they're calling Burma?
Myanmar.
Yeah. So he got called there, and he just, you know, became this Buddhist teacher. He's kind of a fascinating person. I'll talk about my experiences with him maybe some other episode.
Sure.
But he does like new moon, full moon rituals.
Huh.
So,
well,
so I know. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
In Chicago, they, you know, in the summertime, they have the full moon jams, you know, which is a gathering of you know, people spitting fire and people playing music and dancing out at like Foster Beach, you know, which I've been playing music. I've been playing music at that for many years at this point, you know.
Well, but it's a pagan ritual.
It's a pagan ritual. Yeah. I mean, it's a live thing. It's live. Like it's intense, you know.
Well, so I think the thing in this for me, when I was thinking about this, is that, you know, we as 21st century folks, we can do this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. We don't have to just leave this idea sitting in some old books or some old shit from the past or something. We can make these things happen. Like you could go every month to a full moon ritual and, you know, bring your conga, you know, and like do your thing, and you're participating in the energy of that thing. Right. And then it's kind of like the full flowering of the moon is kind of like the full, you know, again, it's like the new moon, and then that full moon is kind of important, right?
Yeah.
There's that feeling of that energy coming through really strongly for whatever month that is, and, you know, whatever might astrologically be happening, then you're getting that full feeling, you know?
Yeah.
I think in a lot of the Taoist stuff, they talk about the full moon being like, that's when the spirit shines like super strong, you know, because the moon kind of reflects the rhythm of a person's life. Our lives end, but we're reborn with the new moon, and then we reach this full flowering of this full moon, and then our lives will kind of again, you know, go through, we'll come around again. But you know, that full moon feeling is kind of powerful, right? Taoists talk about that too. So we can find those monthly rituals for ourselves if we're into it. You know, you can come and like hang out with Daniel on Foster Beach, and if you're like local enough to do it. But you know, we could do it. Like it's not like it's not available to us. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right. It's available for sure.
It's available. Or I think I do sometimes try to keep a weekly kind of ritual thing too, where I do try to, like, again, maybe it goes back to like my interest in Kabbalah back in the day and things like that, where you try to like maybe keep Saturday kind of free for spiritual practice on a weekly basis. Do you have anything like that set up in your life on the weekly? I do the monthly for sure, especially with these sort of tantric things, the 10th and the 24th I do, you know.
No, not particular.
Yeah. I guess I got used to doing this. So I'll sometimes try to make a Saturday where I'll be like, okay, this is the Saturday and this is the day when I work on myself, you know, a day of rest, which really means like kind of a day of like practice, you know,
right.
Of looking inside yourself as opposed to looking at the outside world or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got used to it kind of on the daily for me, because there is this idea that you can kind of just take those windows of time throughout the day. Like in the Tantric Buddhist thing, there's the idea that you can do like 6 sessions of meditation a day. we can't always do that as modern people because our lives aren't always set up easy to do
Right.
that, but if you listen to like the Dalai Lama, he'll keep that thing, right? He'll keep that schedule every day and do those sessions. And it's a lot like, what we were talking about in Islam or in Judaism, where you keep the practice, throughout the day. But we could do that for ourselves in our own way. And I know I
Right.
have, where I
Yeah.
go through and I say, okay, I'm gonna make sure that I wake up, I do my morning session. I'm definitely gonna have an evening session, and I'll try to do like stuff in between. So I try to keep maybe 4 sessions or something, 2 in the early part of the day, 2 in the last part of the day, which is like kind of part of one of the tantric practices that I do to do that. So I'm a person who kind of tries to keep my things, going. I try to like, if I'm doing something, I'll try to do it. But it depends on your day. If your day's super busy, it makes sense. But even if you just take those 5 or 10 minutes with that, it'll feel good, right? Because you're tapping into that rhythm of the day.
Yeah.
2 sessions in the sun part of the day, and maybe two sessions after the sun goes down. Even if you just spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes just pulling back into yourself a little bit with whatever you like to do, recenter yourself. That's like a good daily vibe to have. How's it for you? I mean, I don't know. We don't talk about this too much. So this is how it is for me, but I got used to doing this, I kind of built this up over years. I think we'll all work on it in whatever way we can make things work practically. But I mean, I don't know. What do you have something like this in your life? Or are you kind of more freestyle depending what's going on in your schedule for the day?
No, I'm always morning, and then, decent about the evening. Not always, definitely not a stickler. During the daytime, not usually. Just that there doesn't opportunity.
Your life is too busy. You got too many things.
Yeah, it's hard, because I don't like to feel like I have a super tight time to do it. It's better than nothing. I get 5 minutes. Of course, I have 5 minutes. Everybody has time. There's not you have time. But I have it unless I'm on retreat or getting ready for something. The extra 2-3 sessions a day, I don't prioritize it for whatever reason. Just being honest,
Yeah. It's like we're all going to handle it in our own ways.
Yeah.
Right. I think for me, it got to be, well, I'm like I don't know, I'm maybe an overly sincere person. Probably even like with something like Gelek Rinpoche, Tibetan teacher who passed away, he would say these things kind of knowing that most people aren't going to do it.
Right.
But I don't know. I felt like with someone like him, I felt like, oh, okay, he was so nice to me. I'm going to try to do this. You know what I mean? And maybe it's a little guilty feeling. But he was kind of a big person about keeping commitments, and I kind of like, well, okay, out of respect for Rinpoche, I'm going to try to do this. And
right. But
in the end, it ended up being good for me. I when I was doing my Zen in the very beginning, I definitely would do like my sessions for sure. So I had a kind of a discipline in me.
Right.
There's a certain discipline you have to build up.
Yeah.
Right. There's no doubt it's a discipline thing. Right. I think the payoff is it just feels good.
Yes.
So it's not like okay, I just did this really unpleasant thing and okay, good for me.
Right.
It's more like if I actually take the time to make myself do this, this is going to feel great. It's going to feel much better than the mood I might have been in that made me not want to do this.
Right.
Which is what happens, right? We can all be honest about that.
Yeah.
When we talk about our New Year's resolutions a little bit at the end, like I'm trying to make myself better with this because I know that I can feel really good if I just make myself do this. But every once in a while, I kind of half-ass it.
Well, let's just go there then, Eric. What we kind of have this in the notes. Let's talk about like what are these? What are the sort of like Tibetan view of the obstructions that would stop you from talking?
Oh yeah, before I do it, can I say one more thing, Daniel, before we totally jump?
Yeah, sure. Because our time is
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, my one teacher from China, Master Shengli Wang, would also talk about this other thing that's just good on a daily basis, which would just be at the end of the day, you can go through and you can just say, how did this day look to me? So he would recommend this nighttime practice. I just wanted to throw it out.
Like a reflection?
Yeah, like a self-reflection thing at the end of the day. Just to go, okay, what was this like? So that's another thing that you might think of incorporating.
Okay.
And it like, you can kind of resolve things for yourself in the evening. Kind of go like, sorry, my voice is getting COVID-y. Kind of go like, hold on, the mic off for a second.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, it sounds though like kind of like like you would journal at the end of the day or something like that.
Yeah.
Something that you would do mentally.
I think like part of the idea was like at the end of the day, you can look at like he always thought that when you look back at your day, you probably realize you did a bunch of good stuff.
Sure.
You did a bunch of good things for other people. Maybe you did something nice for your significant other. You did nice things for your kids. Maybe you called your mom. You helped somebody out at work. If you really look back at your day, you probably did a lot of good things. So it kind of puts your mind in a good space at the end of the day to realize, oh, wait a minute, my day was actually pretty good.
Right.
I did a lot of good things for myself. Even if you don't feel that way, because, you hit the accurate observation. A lot of people at the end of the day, you just feel like, man, another crappy day or something. A lot of times you do feel that way or kind of, But when you really take a step back and you look at it, you realize, oh no, my day was actually, I did a lot of good things in this day, And then he would suggest, even the things that you were like, well, I kind of got in an argument with my friend. That wasn't the great thing. You could kind of like just say, okay, I'll resolve that tomorrow. You can make a little plan of how you're going to do it. And it puts your mind at ease, And then he said it was kind of things that then you could kind of do a little bit of just allowing your mind to relax in some kind of meditative thing and fall asleep. And I thought, well, that's a great thing to do too. I spent some years doing that. I just wanted to throw that one out there.
No, it's nice. It's nice.
Yeah, it's a kind of a nice thing that's very accessible.
Right.
And like kind of very handy dandy on, like for anybody, it's just a nice thing to do. Yeah. All right. So, okay, to the New Year's resolution part of this. I know you did an episode with Joey. So wherever.
Well, before you go there, let's do the obstacles.
Oh yeah, I was going to do that with that thing though.
Okay. All right.
We're talking about the same thing. It's cool.
Okay.
So, like to me, I thought, well, how do you choose what you're going to work on? That was my thought.
Right. Okay.
This question. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, well, what I've always found to be very helpful, and again, I think really accessible, is just to look and go, what's the most obvious thing that might be causing me a problem in my life?
Sure.
So if you're in the New Year's frame of mind, you could say, okay, so this is the part of my life that I can really see clearly what I can work on. And that's like, I think one of the really handy Buddhist tantric ideas that they kind of ask you just like it's a self-reflection again.
Sure.
Right. But you look back and you say, okay, let me look at this honestly. What do I really have an issue with? Let me start chipping away at that. So it focuses you in on what the most salient thing is. Right? What do you think of that?
I think that's good. I think the only issue for me with this kind of mindset is that like it's moving towards your negative aspects with a positive tone, but that you're still trending towards like the should nots, as opposed to like something else where you can, and not saying it has to be binary, but like I'm more akin to feel like looking at my things that I want to improve upon because they're just untapped. You know what I'm saying? Like,
gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? They're similar. We're splitting hairs essentially, but like, I want to try and like foster more growth out of this. How do I become more creative? Not maybe, yes, that would I can reduce my habits of, whatever sports gambling, and that I could take that time and be more creative, whatever.
Yeah.
But with the focus on like, I want to foster growth of things as opposed to like the kind of like whittling away at other things, even though that is also important because you do want to tackle the hard things also.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting like way to think about that. I suppose if I were to be all personal about it,
sure,
which we try to do.
Yeah.
There's been times when I just had the thing of because I get what you're saying. I do like to like accentuate the positive, right? Yeah. So let me look at the things in me that I want to grow and develop more. I like that idea. That's even part of my resolutions for the year for me when we get to it. But there are times. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I feel like, as practitioners, we're looking for pathologies, right? Looking for things that are not functioning well in our patients. That's literally our job, right?
Yeah.
But then I always, the most difficult questions I'll ask my patients, and for those who, I have never seen, which is more than I have, unfortunately, but I'm still young, give me a chance, I ask people I say, give me your two best things about you at the end. They have the hardest time answering that question because they're so focused on like, okay, my sleep and I have a headache and my, nose is running or whatever the case is. And we're like, all right, well, don't do this anymore. Stop having that. We're always saying no. And I'm trying to like, okay, well, then where are some places we could balance it out and say yes to? You know, where are some things we could put our energy towards? Just because it provides a little bit of a balance. You know, it's less structured, but it is still a structure.
Well, I guess that kind of like vibes with what, my TCM mentor, my medical mentor was talking about, Master Wong.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're saying like, okay, at the end of the day, look at the positive stuff. Don't sit there and go like, okay, I fucked this one up
Right.
and I could have done this one differently. If you take a step back and you look at all the positive stuff that you did, you realize you did a lot.
Right.
And that actually came from a certain like Chinese tradition. It wasn't even just his idea, but there was like a root to that,
Mm-hmm.
because people have so many negative feelings about themselves, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So what you're worried about in this thing is it's just going to make you think about okay, this is the negative things about me that kind of suck, and I'll just dwell on them some more or something like that.
And the problem is that like inevitably when we screw up, because it's going to happen, we're human, then there's the shame and the guilt around it. I didn't do this thing, and I know I'm not supposed to be doing this thing, and here I am doing it again. Like my cousin Joey brought this up, that like, he has these things that he likes to do in the morning, cold showers and whatever. And he's like, if I don't get it, he goes, oh, then my hormones are going to be off and my day's going to be ruined. And then I'm not going to sleep well tonight. Now tomorrow's messed up. He's like, oh, because I missed a shower. He's like, I still took a shower. It just wasn't cold, And he's like, there's got to be some level of like movement towards a betterment, having a good overall habits, but then also having some flexibility within that to be like, okay, well, now I need to practice whatever, patience or forgiveness or whatever on myself, so that I'm not like, the no's are not no.
Yeah. So it could be like, even with what I was talking about earlier with like Rinpoche, my experience there, I wanted to keep these practices that he had thrown out as optimal to do, because okay, I'm a sincere person, and I felt very grateful to him. I felt great for the Lama Glenn too, but Lama Glenn's much more flexible.
Very flexible. He's a yogi.
I'm gonna like, if you do it, don't do it. Probably be good if you do it, but if you don't do it, it's still okay. So Lama Glenn's like the balancing. Those two have been in my life the two poles of my connection to like tantric Buddhism, right? Dalai Lama too, of course, but those two. And so in the beginning with the Gelek Rinpoche thing, I could be like, okay, I'm gonna be really strict with myself, but eventually you're gonna fuck it up.
Eventually you're going,
even if you're trying to be, and like, so I really learned was like, probably from the Lama Glenn side of me, was like, okay, I fucked this up. It happens. I didn't get that cold shower in. All right, it's not gonna like create this cascade of catastrophe in my existence. I'll be flexible. I'll figure out how to do it tomorrow. And I do think about that, like I was in my retreat a little bit towards I could get in once I got back from Montreal and all my air travel disaster. I did get a couple of days in where I was able to do my kind of New Year's style retreat. It would normally be longer, but I always think about that whole thing of like, okay, so I could be a little tough on myself on these things. So how do I orient this so that I don't get the kind of thing that you're talking about? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like self-reproach.
I had to hit pause for a second because your screen was froze, but we're good.
Oh, we're good. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm okay. All right. So okay, with the caveat of what you're saying, I guess I'll go through like this other side. I guess my experience with this, Daniel, and see if this resonates with you.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about this going from 2022 into 2023. I was like, well, okay, if I look at myself honestly, I can say this part of myself is causing me some problems, and I probably have to work on it. So maybe this is when, you have those moments where you can go, okay, let me like the tough love part. Let me look at
that's right.
Part of me and go, okay, well, this I have to acknowledge is something that I have to think of what I want to do about. Maybe with the goal not of like, again, self-reproach, but like, okay, I'm gonna work on this part of myself and my life will get better.
Yeah.
Spiritually and practically.
Yeah.
So how they did sometimes do this in the Buddhist world, including like the Tantric Buddhist world, is you can kind of talk about, sometimes I'll say it's like 3 poisons, but I don't like that because that sounds too harsh too. I don't like that kind of language.
Yeah.
That kind of way, for the reasons you were talking about earlier. But maybe these, you could call them like obstructions or something. If you look at yourself in terms of these 3, you can kind of go, okay, like in Buddhist thought, they say probably a lot of your problems are going to come from either the idea that you have issues around anger and aggression that are going to cause you problems, right? These are also sometimes framed as like the more masculine energies within everyone's system kind of like acting out, right?
Yeah.
You can have problems around ignorance, which means just not seeing things clearly enough, not understanding things clearly enough. And then there's like deep things within this idea, like, can you understand like deep parts of Buddhist philosophy and stuff? But even outside of that, it can just be, okay, do I have problems because I'm not seeing the world clearly and accurately, And then there's this whole idea of having problems around like the negative sides of attachment. Are my attachment things causing me problems?
So that was the most fun.
Yeah. Or potentially the most difficult.
Right. Yep.
Or like the ones that, So the general thought is it's a lot easier to identify the anger and aggression ones, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have issues around that, you're probably going to notice this.
Yeah.
But you can ask yourself, where are these things pressing? There's no doubt if I get personal on this, when I was younger, I was an angry young man in the quintessential classic sense. I had issues with society that I still have issues now with society, but I'm just as angry about it.
Right. It's still there.
I still bitch every week. I bitch every week.
That's right.
Yeah. I transformed it into a whole spiritual philosophy. So that was good.
You become productive in your anger.
I took it and made it something good. But I definitely had issues. I would act out angry in ways that later on I'd be like, why did they do that? And it was something that I had to be honest with myself. Like, oh yeah, this is a problem. I came from a very angry family, right? People would act out like violently, angrily. I was like physically abused when I was a kid and stuff. And, there's a cycle that has to get broken in those things. And, and I did it, but it was like, that was pretty obvious. It was like, okay, this is like right up in my face. And I guess I didn't feel at the time, like I was like, it wasn't even the question of being hard on myself, like for what you're bringing up earlier. It was more like, okay, this is pretty obvious. I better try to fix this because this is obviously a spiritual problem, a psycho-spiritual problem.
Right.
And so that was pretty clear. Then, I'll throw it back to you. But then as I got along, I've tried to work on ignorance in different ways, this kind of thing of, okay, can I see the world clearly? Psychologically, can I see the world clearly in myself and others? We're like people who like to learn and so it was like all the things I learned, Chinese medicine, or even before that, I was doing psychology and physics and the spiritual stuff I got involved in. I was always kind of based on the idea, like, well, let me try to see the world more and more clearly for myself,
Sure.
for what that means to me. So that was probably the thing that I've tried to work on. And I guess I would feel like I made some progress with that. I had lots of concerns about, because I was sick when I was young, I had lots of concerns of like anxiety and fears around like mortality and death and things, because I was sick for a long time when I was in my teens. So I felt like that was really important to work on. And that was, I guess, for me, part of like seeing, I don't know, the spiritual parts of life that are a little bit transcendent of death. That was a big deal for me. So that was kind of like maybe my chipping away at what I thought was ignorance or something. And then, the attachment is the one that probably we'll talk about maybe when we look at New Year's resolutions a little bit. But, that's the hardest one, right? Because it's the most emotional and it's probably the most complex to figure out what you want to do with.
Yeah.
But that's, probably how it's been for me. I don't know. Does this resonate with you at all? How's this been?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I would, say that, I feel like people probably, some of this might also be like a lifelong type situation, where like when you're younger, you're probably more quick to react if you have, the energy, I'm saying, like you're healthy
you're
when you're younger.
You're more volatile. Those
you're not concerned about consequences. You know what I'm saying? You just do your thing. You're like, rah, or whatever,
Yeah.
And so I think that, with time and with responsibility and with seeing some of the consequences for people around you, maybe even yourself, hopefully not so bad, but, definitely people around you, you can see that like some of these behaviors can really be detrimental to your health and the health of other people, around you.
How did that work in your life? Did you have to go through something like this on the personal level? Or
oh yeah, of course. Yeah, there's no doubt. When I was much younger, I definitely was, a far angrier individual, by far, breaking things and punching holes in walls and, just like, intimidation and, things like that. And I look at, I look at some pictures from when I was a teenager, and there's definitely a level of like, I don't know, residual resentment that I saw within myself. And, some of that, I definitely, when I was really young, I had a bully for a good year,
Oh, and so you were resisting someone who was a bully.
Yeah. And so I just, and moving around a lot, you're always having to fit in. And sometimes the fitting in new places is just, you know, you have your armor around you because you're not quite sure, because you're in a new environment, you're not safe. You know, and you're supposed to, that's when you're supposed to be on edge a little bit, or guarded, or whatever, you know, from a, I don't know, historical standpoint of our species. You know, if you're,
you know, with kids, it's weird too, because sometimes they, you know, like if kids target another kid, it doesn't even a lot of times make any sense.
right.
Like we've all seen that. Like, why is this kid getting
Why
so
is that
much
kid
shit?
picked? Yeah.
There's no reason. They're just, you know, something weird happens, you know?
And I, you know, and I've definitely been the savior of other smaller kids, even though I'm definitely not a big person, but I'm willing to get in there, you know, and mix it up, which has been a theme in my life now that I'm thinking about it, you know? So then that draws the ire towards me, but versus a little kid who's got asthma and has to puff every 10 seconds, you know, like,
who really can't handle the physical intimidation because it just medically,
or the abuse, and not just the, like the abuse, the actual, like the beatings, you know, whereas I'm more willing to, this is like a very strange thing. We're talking about this, you know, as I thought about this yesterday, you know, that like, yeah, like I there's one kid in particular in first grade, like his name was Graham. He was a super skinny, you know, probably was a preemie is my guess, because he was really little. We were friends, and he had an inhaler, and he just, you know, he couldn't run, he couldn't do it. He was, you know, always having this thing. His parents were divorced at a young age. I mean, I'm sure if we went through and got his trauma, we would find it, you know, but he was picked on at a school that I went to in Oak Park. And I just remember they would always like put wood chips in his pants and like push him down the slide, or,
Jesus,
you know, like nasty. Just, you know, and beat him up.
Humiliating.
Oh, humiliating, like kick him and whatever. And so I got in the way, you know, but then I took the brunt of the punishment at that point, you know, and he was never willing to let himself, and I don't know why this feels like apropos, but I'm going to just share it, you know, he never let himself cry. He wouldn't do it in public. Whereas my emotionality ran the entire gamut, you know, if I got kicked in the balls, which happened several times, I'm crying, you know, because it hurt, you know what I'm saying? I got junk, and, you know, you don't want to get kicked in your nuts. And so like, I think part of that was like, you know, me protecting him, you know, and then as I moved to different places, I just went.
Honest, he might have been getting abused at home, and sometimes when you're abused at home, you hold that shit in.
Yeah, he might. Right? That's true.
How to hold that in front of a parent, right? You're not going to like cry in front of the abusive parent; that'll just piss them off more.
Right. Right.
Say, oh. You want to just go to the end?
So Eric, you were saying that
sometimes, like maybe another 10 minutes, right?
You were saying that sometimes when people have abuse at home, they withhold it, right?
Yeah, they hold it in, right? Because you don't want to cry in front of a parent; it'll just piss them off more.
Yeah, and so I was willing. I was willing to take the abuse, you know, to be the protector. And then as that went forward, I just stepped in. I was in that role very frequently, and then eventually, I think I learned to just take the attention myself. You know, because I was used to getting it anyway. So I just became the loud kid, you know, and that's how it went, you know? And so from that, it's like, and then working through that was like, you know, then I could be angry, you know, I'm justified in my anger. Right. And that was for a long time. How can I be justified in being angry? That was really the way in which I felt like I could be angry. And then,
within the tantric practices, I mean, like the ones that like seem to resonate with you were the ones that express power.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and defense.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Like a yamantaka.
Yep.
Right. Like a lot of times when we talk about it, the one that resonates with you is like a yamantaka because it's a defender showing power.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember this like back in the day when we were talking earlier off mic, when we've known each other for a while now.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to think about.
Yeah. But it's like 10 years or 11.
Yeah. But I mean, the very beginning of us meeting one another, we were talking about like the use of power.
Yeah.
You know, how do you direct power in meaningful and beneficial ways?
Yeah.
You know, with beneficence behind it. Yeah, that was like a question for you. Like, because part of it was your idea of like, I wanted to like protect and defend.
Yeah.
Right. That was a deep part of who you are.
And it's been that way forever. Right? It's been that way. It's been that way since I was a child. Always been that way. You know?
Yeah.
And so but having that, you know, using anger using aggression, using assertiveness, has a negative side, and that like it has that residual, you know, we don't know how to pick up and put the emotions down. We pick them up. I'm angry, but then I'm also kind of always a little bit angry, you know. I'm not able to like go, like, you know, when people cry, okay, they cry and then they're done crying for the most part, you know, they may be sad, but they're done. Whereas like if you're angry, it sticks, you know, it's like always a little bit there because it helps you to get through things. So as I got older, looking to see where that anger can be justified and where that anger is detrimental to me, and then being able to turn it on and turn it off has been kind of the sort of realization for me on that part, which I guess then goes to the ignorance part. You know, it's like learning about those differences.
In like the Buddhist Tantra thing, like, and we all get to think about this, right? That's the point of this conversation, is like, how do you take these qualities, the more aggressive and angry things, and learn how to use them in the best ways?
Yeah.
Not repressing them, right?
No, not repressing.
Not repressing the attachment part too. If you're going to do Buddhist Tantra, right?
Yeah.
You don't repress it, but how do I learn to use this in ways that are good for me, good for other people, spiritually enlightening, you know?
Yeah.
Like was spiritually helpful for people. How do I learn how to use these feelings in ways that will be helpful to myself and others? That's the Buddhist Tantra thing. That's why it's appealing to me, at least, right? Because it says like, okay, you can't really repress these things past a certain point, right? You know, and that my thing has been attachment. But, you know, even like one of my favorite like Zen, you know, kind of Buddhist poets, EQ, he has this whole thing like the red thread of attachment. I can't cut it. You know, it's uncuttable in a certain sense, right? It's an uncuttable thread. It's always kind of there, you know. So as opposed, and that's always been like an appeal to me of this way of thinking, you know, like there's a part of this, these energies should be able to be used for the good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, like take these energies and use them for the good. Whether we think of it this way or we haven't really done a lot on the 5 phases of Chinese medicine and Taoist culture, but maybe all of those things have a place.
Yeah.
Right. If you can learn how to use them in the right way. You know, you're right when you're saying medically we tend to emphasize the negative, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to fix problems.
For sure.
And I guess this idea of focusing in on like, well, this is the area where I have the issues is a way of trying to fix a problem. It's a medical metaphor.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of Buddhism uses medicine as a metaphor. It's like, this is the diagnosis. So this is how you apply the medicine, and the medicine is like dealing with this issue. But maybe the part that gets more positive from what you're talking about is like, okay, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to learn how to use it for the positive.
Yeah.
And I thought this way. I felt like this more aggressive part has a place. It's going to function to do something good for myself and others. You know what I mean? It's going to mean something in my life that's going to be good.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you stand up and you defend other people, right? Or whatever it is, you know? Yeah. Maybe that bridges the two things together. Good. We bridged the two things. We wove them together like a nice tantric thread, right?
That's right.
Like a nice pashmina scarf that some guy in the market in Marrakesh is trying to sell for too much money, but you buy it anyways, which I did. All right, so maybe quick before we totally go, like, how was 2022 for you? How was it as a year? What'd you think of it?
Man, it was fantastic. I bought everything that I wanted to buy. I bought it. We finally traveled. You know, we were in Italy. We did our episode, you know, on the
we did the episode from Italy
when I was in Florence. And I mean, it was good. I mean, there was a level of frustration for a good period. And there was some interpersonal things that are still not quite yet worked out, but I made a point to address before the end of the year. Which for me, those are the hardest parts, you know, it's the relationship things with people. Cause I want to have people around me and I want everything to be flowing and good. And when they're not, it's like, you know, it's a person, it tugs at my heart, you know? But overall, like I'm, you know me, man, I'm going to be positively tinged and say like, in comparison to the couple of years previous, better work-wise, better, you know, some amazing journeys and meditations and practices. And you know, we developed this program, you know, as we went on, and I feel like we're at a new sort of like level of presentation with where we're at with it now. And that comes with practice, you know? And so like 2022 was a year of continued continued positive practice. And for me to be able to allow myself to enjoy some things, you know, motorcycle and, you know, whatever else. Right. So for me, I look at it, I was like, Pretty good. I'll take it. I'll take it again.
But this is kind of interesting. I wanted to do it because we all have these years that are easier or rougher, right? So when you get to this little thinking, okay, you can kind of like look back, look forward, and there's no doubt that 22 will go down as a very tough year for me.
Sure.
With some silver linings in there. I did feel like on the silver lining side, something happened with my creativity. I got like more musically creative. I think, I made steps musically that were like pretty good. And I did think about things having to do with writing, and we have projects we want to work on around that. But certainly, like I felt like my creative juices were kind of driven a little bit in a paradoxical way, because there were tough things that happened. My uncle died, so
in the summertime.
Really, we realized the full extent of his dementia, and there was a lot of caretaking with that. And then I had, like some personal losses, and then one person like very, very special to me, where like things just didn't quite work out in our connection with one another. And that was really kind of like, was sort of like almost like flowed through the whole year. But in a funny way, it also kind of drove some of my creativity and some of my other things that happen, because sometimes it works that way, right?
You
have something that like, okay, this is a painful experience, but it's also inspiring something maybe good to me. So I definitely felt that vibe throughout the year. But it's definitely going to be a year I'll look back on and be like, oh yeah, this wasn't that easy. This was more of a tougher one, right? Because of like personal loss, family member, and loss of close people, especially someone very close to me. But I was thinking about, because I went back to 2021, I was like, oh, this is great. And then, and I just wanted to share it because we all have times like this, one year you're like, man, this is like, wow, this has happened so great. And the next year ends up being difficult. It's kind of like what Mary Kay likes to talk about from the Taoist point of view. Things are always going to go up and down.
They're always going to be up and down
on that practical level.
I mean, but like even in 20, which is a tough year for everybody, we had so many people over our house all the time. I know, bad, naughty, but we had, the whole summer was just jam packed with people, just parties and hanging out. Like, I know it was rough financially or whatever for myself and many other people, just like the uncertainty, but we just had people, we were partying, like basically not all the time, but like we just had people over. We're playing games, we're doing dinners, we're outside barbecuing, like it just, the community aspect of it was really fulfilling, really.
That's what's fascinating about it, because 2021, I was like, this is a great year. Even though things were still messed up in the world, I was like, this year's awesome. So it just goes to show like the personal rhythm of things and the disconnects,
Sure.
Where probably for me, going from 2019 into 2020, that was a little tough. But that always is something personal for me. I'll usually be like, I'll have some problem in my life, and some person who's close to me will have some difficulties, like what you were talking about earlier a little bit too. And that'll mess my shit up.
I feel like this.
I'm just a hardy person.
I got you, man.
That's always going to cause me issues.
I feel like this year started. I feel like this year for me started in December, and I have been in a creative space since then. And that what the year that I have planned, or at least the next 4 or 5 months have planned, came from like 10 days in December, and so
it is interesting how it works out, right?
Whatever window
even
open.
Though the year was weird, I did good music, and like and I actually got in touch with like the writer George Saunders. So this is the year I met George Saunders in this crappy year, but I was sending him music, and we talked about creativity a little bit. Whether I can ever get him to come on this fucking podcast is a different question.
I'm less excited about that relationship at this point, to be honest.
I guess it won't turn out for us to come on the podcast. I'm a little bit like guardedly disappointed about that too. But anyways, it was like kind of a cool thing, because my creative juices were flowing, and I would like sending him musical stuff, and he was like, oh, this is cool. I don't know, like funny shit happens even in the midst of what I would ultimately say was like a crap year. I felt creatively kind of inspired. So I guess it was kind of to my mind, it felt good to talk about, as I like act through this COVID. Because it was like, we all go through these ups and downs. So I thought it was kind of good to share about that a little bit, because we're all going through this. For me, with 2023, as far as the resolution goes, and what you were telling my daughter, well, she asked me this, and I think she thought I was going to say to fix my workout schedule and like lose a few pounds, or, whatever I was supposed to say. And I said, what I really want to do is I just want to get even more deeply into my Buddhist Tantra. and she went, ugh, ugh. Because she was like, that's just what you would say about everything. What a boring answer. But I was like, no, I really meant it. I was like, I knew that there were things I could do, and I started doing it. Where I could start working on aspects of my own self and my own stuff with this that is very meaningful. I tried to like refine the bliss in myself. I wanted to refine this tantric bliss in myself.
Oh, that's good.
So that's sort of my goal for the year. And then the acknowledgement of like, I'm on this path. We'll talk about it like in future episodes, but I know I'm on this path of attachment. Sometimes they call the Buddhist tantras the path of attachment. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm on this path, and this is how I roll. I was talking with someone yesterday about it,
That's what I was taught. I mean, that's what I bought all these things I'm attached to now, I'm like, oh, I love that thing. Oh, give me that thing. Oh, my favorite.
I had a funny conversation with somebody yesterday because he's like a more Taoist guy that I know. And he was like, well, I want to have non-interference and just flow with things. And, I don't want to control things. And that was what he's working on. I was like, okay, yeah, you're doing a very Taoist thing. And my answer was something like, yeah, I'm a path of attachment person. And I always want to own that. And I just have been thinking about that a lot, like what that means to me and where I think that goes. And I guess part of my goal with that too, to close it out, would be like, I want to like make sure that we do episodes around that too, which we do.
Sure. Yeah.
But in a certain sense, we're all on this path of attachment because we're not nuns and monks and stuff. We have people that we're close to and we love, and family members and friends and significant others and so on.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think it all like kind of like came together for me in the idea of like, yeah, I want to find this bliss in myself after what was like maybe kind of a difficult year. And I know I can do that within my own practice and within my own self. And then I want to also continue to work in the world on like understanding this path of attachment idea. And, and it also relate back to some of the podcast episodes I want to do. So that's kind of like maybe my little summary of 2023 for me. How about for you? What do you got going on?
Man, I got that. There's just so much I'm giving, like I've not recommitted, but it's just sort of like, it just sort of opened back up again for me in terms of being public facing. And I guess I could say holding public space for healing. That's what I'm doing. That
new moon Capricorn guy. Right?
Yeah, that's what's happening. So a friend of mine asked me to do a cacao ceremony for her birthday, which I hadn't really done for a couple of years, and like immediately it went from 3 people to 15, and then I've done several since, and they all sell out like immediately. And I was inspired to name it, do some graphic design around it, and give a nice description of. So now I have that thing, and we're making T-shirts, and I'm probably going to change my website, and so that came, and we're doing that regularly. Where I'm doing, like I mentioned earlier, we're doing a men's retreat with myself and a classmate of mine, and ceremony will again be this year, and we're leading a retreat in Mexico, and the shamanic courses will come up in April again, and just and having and trying to incorporate like inviting people to do these things, because they're not here, they're not really in existence that much. So I feel good and feel confident that like
that's really from your heart too, though. That's your space, right?
That's right. That's right. So I'm but there's a level of vulnerability, right? When you open yourself up, maybe it's not well attended, maybe nobody comes, you know what I'm saying? So you feel like you're here to do your thing, and there's like one person there waving your little flag around, yay,
What was kind of interesting about that? I did the Dalai, like 2022 would also be the year that I got my favorite tantric Buddhist practice empowered from the Dalai Lama via Zoom. So right. I was like, oh, that's a cool part of 2022.
Which is still available online, by the way. It's on YouTube. You can still get it.
I wonder what that's supposed to be like you're supposed to like say that you have that empowerment if you just watch it. I wonder. But anyway, so he did it, and that kind of shook me up a little bit. That was certainly spiritual meaning for me. But like there were only thousands of people in the world who attended that. It wasn't like it. I thought like there are going to be all kinds of people doing this. He's the Dalai Lama. He's not going to be around forever. I thought there'd be people all over the world, and there were people all over the world, but in the thousands. And I was like, okay, so the Dalai Lama could only drum up like some thousands of people,
but yet
we're all doing the best we can. Even the Dalai Lama, right?
Your random TikTok influencer eating whippets, can get millions of followers. So,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Go figure.
Go figure.
Anyway, so I don't know. It's good. I wanted to like kind of close with the idea of like this is how 2022 felt for both of us. You know, this is how 2023 maybe is rolling, because it is the kind of thing that, you know, for, you know, if you're listening, and for all of us, you go through these ups and down things, and, you know, thought it'd be good to just kind of share it at the end of the episode, right?
No.
So maybe it does make sense to, yeah, kind of make these goals what's coming up for the next year, right? So maybe if you're listening, you all have your own goals too.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, thank you. We're getting we're getting our year started. And you know, more to come.
See you again.
Yeah, you as well. Glad we're
draws a little bit about these things.
Yeah, glad we're in the flow. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether this is your first episode or your umpteenth. That's not even a word, umpteenth, but you know, whatever, we'll say it. You know, if you're watching us on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. We love the feedback. If you want a little bit more of a deeper conversation, please feel free to hit us up at ginandtantra@gmail.com. That's ginandtantra@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at Gin and Tantra. And yeah, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, give us a review. Give us the review, man. It helps the show. Share is caring. Sharing is caring. And we do appreciate all the love from everybody. So from Eric, this is Daniel. We appreciate everybody listening. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.